At 14:38 local time on the Arabian Sea, the USS Spruant was 3 hours into a screening patrol, keeping the water quiet while a classified operation ran 30 miles to the north. On her scope, a scatter of fishing dhows, nets in the water, a routine patrol mission. But this would all change in a matter of seconds. Unknown to the radar operator, one of those contacts had 2 anti-ship missiles on its rails and a single order: close the USS Abraham Lincoln. Both diesels hammered to full power and the contact ripped out of the cluster. 13 tons of fiberglass and diesel, an IRGC-Pay class fast attack boat that had been drifting invisible among fishing vessels for over an hour. The TAO, the ship's tactical action officer, the one who decides what shoots and when, hit the command net before the classification was even complete. Forward of the bridge, of the 5-inch gun slew toward the bearing. If you look here at the Mark 34 gun weapon system, this is the computer that aims the gun. It calculates where the target will be when the shell arrives, factors in wind, ship movement, wave action, and fires. But here's the problem it ran into. The Pay's hull is fiberglass. Steel ships throw hard, consistent radar returns. The signal bounces back clean, and the computer gets a solid track. Fiberglass bounces back something barely larger than the ocean surface around it. Every wave crest flickers the signal like a flickering light bulb. And the fire control computer needed 2 stable pings to calculate a solution. Think of it like trying to aim a rifle at a squirrel through a picket fence while riding a bicycle. You see it, you lose it, and the gap never lines up. The gun fired on the last stable solution. Time of flight 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, a boat doing 52 knots moves 80 meters from where the computer thought it was. The shell hit the ocean 40 meters behind the pay cap. Close enough to throw a water spout over the fantail. Close enough for the helmsman to feel the concussion thump through the hole like a fist hitting a car hood. Close enough to ruin his day, not close enough to end it. The gun reacquired, recalculated, fired. Track jump between trigger pull and impact. 40 meters left. The gun was doing everything right. And the target was doing something right back. The 5-inch gun can hit a speedboat. It's done it in exercises. Calm seas, predictable heading, cooperative targets. A fiberglass hull jinking at 52 knots through 3-foot swells is not an exercise. See, it's every hard variable stacked up on top of each other at the same time. 12 rounds gone, 8 left in the ready drum. 2 minutes to reload. 2 minutes of silence from the only weapon that could reach the boat, while the boat closed another 3.5 kilometers toward the carrier. And that number mattered because the classification had finally come back. If you look here at the intelligence graphic, that's a Kauser anti-ship missile on the rails. The Kaus is a Chinese-assigned sea skimmer that Iran builds under license. Basically copied the homework, changed the name on the top, and bolted it to a speedboat, 20-kilometer range, fast enough that the carrier SE-Wiz close-in weapon system gets maybe 6 seconds of warning before it arrives. 2 of them on the rails. The helmsman's orders were to get inside 10 kilometers and fire at 52 knots, 70 seconds away. Locked inside the pay cap, the helmsman didn't need to be clever. Standard IRGC attack profile, full throttle. Slight ponya, every few seconds. Bow on to keep the cross-section smaller than a garage door. Less than a warship. More like a jet ski with anger issues. The TAO made the call. Cease fire on the Mark 45. Launched the helicopter. The MH-60 Romeo has been spinning up since the first radar contact. Deck crew yanking chocks and rotor wash, while the pilot skipped every checklist line that didn't end with the aircraft getting airborne. The MH-60R Romeo is the Navy sub-hunter and surface attack helicopter, the Swiss Army knife of carrier aviation, equally comfortable tracking submarines or putting missiles into speedboats. If you look here at the stub pylons, each Romeo carries up to 4 AGM-114R Hellfire missiles. The sensor operator in the left seat already had the ANAS-52 multispectral targeting system hunting the contact bearing, a thermal camera on a swivel that can read a license plate from 5 meters. The Romeo lifted, nose dipping hard as the pilot traded altitude for speed. 150 knots toward the target at 200 feet above the white caps. He picked up the pay cap almost immediately. hot white streak against cool blue ocean. Weight trailing behind the hull like a lit fuse. Laser on 11 kilometers to the Lincoln. The helmsman hand went to the Cowser firing switch. The radar warning receiver screamed. Laser airborne source. Something had painted him that he couldn't outrun. Rifle hellfire off the rail. Riding the laser reflection off 13 tons of fiberglass. The hellfire rides a laser that's physically touching the hull right now. No, the gun is basically swinging a sledgehammer blindfolded at a mosquito and hoping for the best. The hellfire is a needle following a thread. The boat jinks. The missile jinks with it. Circular error measured in inches instead of the 80-meter windows the gun was throwing. 49 kilograms of missile carrying an 11-kilogram shaped charge warhead closing at 475 meters per second. Roughly the distance from downtown Dallas to Fort Worth covered in under 4 seconds. The boat didn't sink. It stopped existing. What it ran into, the AGM-114R Hellfire. One frame on the FLIR, a 52-knot thread closing the carrier. Next frame, debris and burning fuel across 200 meters of Arabian Sea. From first radar contact to intercept, 11 minutes. 4 calls in sequence. Cease gun, launch helicopter, designate, fire. And every single one of them was right. That's not just a lucky guess. That's a crew trained specifically for the moment when nothing is going to work. But that first boat was the wrong thing to worry about. The Romeo circled the wreckage. FLIR, the forward-looking infrared camera scanning, and the sensor operator spotted what the IRGC had already sent. 2 more PACAP-class contacts that broke from the DAO cluster the instant the first boat went up, now running at maximum speed toward the Iranian coastline. The first boat wasn't the attack. It was the probe sent to test the response, absorb the reaction, and eat the hellfires that should have been safe for its friends. The other 2 were sprinting for the underground boat pens that honeycomb the southern shore of Keshum Island. If those boats reached the rock, they'd vanish. And by morning, they'd be back with fresh missiles and everything the first helmsman run had taught them. And the Romeo's engagement. Radar emissions, missile plumes. The explosion itself had announced American presence in the lateral. The way a car alarm announces a break-in to the whole neighborhood along the southern coast of Kashim. IRGC coastal defense nodes that had been sitting dormant now spun up. Con surveillance radars, Iran's coastal early warning eyes began radiating, and a Tour M1 air defense battery rolled from its revetment toward the headland overlooking the tunnel complex. But orbiting over western Iraq on armed overwatch, burning holes in the sky the way it had been doing for 4 straight hours, an aircraft the Air Force has been trying to retire for 20 years. East was already turning south to uncover something the Iranians desperately wanted to hide. 2 A-10 Thunderbolts, call signs Pelican 31 and 32, picked up the vector from the E-2D Hawkeye and Banks southeast. If you look here at the aircraft profile, an A-10 was built for exactly this kind of problem, slow enough to loiter for hours, ugly enough that its own pilots call it the Warthog and mean it as a compliment. Think of it as the pickup truck of military aviation. Not fast, not pretty, but it'll haul anything and it never breaks down. The TF-34 turbofans were still sipping fuel after 4 hours on station. 6 hours of endurance with the centerline tank. Nowhere close to needing a tanker. An FA-18 doing this mission burns through its fuel in under 2 hours. But Warthog runs at 20 grand an hour and had been all afternoon. And that patience was about to pay off. Pelican 31 carried the weapons that mattered for this fight. If you look here at the weapon stations, that's a pair of AGM-65D Maverick infrared guided missiles for hardened targets and over 0 pounds of 30mm depleted uranium, feeding the GA-8A Avenger, the 7-barrel cannon that Congress keeps voting to save every budget cycle, despite the Air Force's most creative efforts to send the whole fleet to the boneyard. Today, it was about to remind everyone why. If you look here, the lightning targeting pod on the starboard pylon was already rolling. A 3rd-generation infrared sensor that doesn't just see heat, it tells you what's making it. Think of it as a trail camera that doesn't just catch the deer. It tells you the breed, what it ate for breakfast, and which direction it's heading. Or the pod found both boats at 15 miles. Hot, wide exhaust against dark water, running hard for cum. After 4 hours of empty ocean and cold coffee, the pilot's patrol had just gone from babysitting duty to the reason he joined the Air Force. He locked both tracks, settling into a wide orbit at 12,000 feet, and made a decision no fast jet could afford. If he splashed them now, 2 boats go down and the base stays hidden behind whatever mountain the IRGC carved it into. If he followed them home, he found the facility and everything else inside it. He watched the lead boat accelerate through 50 knots on the lightning display and let it run. He throttled back to 220 knots and dropped to 5,000 feet. Shadowing from a distance, watching the boats draw a vector on his display that pointed like an arrow at a facility CENTCOM didn't know existed an hour ago. The A-10's turbo fans run so cool on infrared that spotting them is like trying to find a lukewarm cup of coffee in a room full of space heaters. Everything else is screaming heat, and the A-10 is just sitting there blending in. Nobody was looking for a warthog. Nobody ever is until the gun starts screaming at you. Pelican 31 watched the first boat decelerate near the coast. The lightning pod zoomed into maximum magnification, and the pilot saw something that made the entire 4-hour orbit worth the fuel. A narrow opening at the waterline of a limestone cliff concealed under camouflage netting and dry vegetation. 8 meters wide, 4 tall. The pay cap nosed in, and the infrared signature winked out. The rock ate it whole. Now the pilot had a problem the Mavericks couldn't solve on their own. The IRGC built blast doors inside these tunnels. A Maverick hits the entrance. The boom echoes through the mountain. The blast door flexes, and 10 minutes later, someone opens it and sweeps up the gravel. You don't punch through a mountain, you collapse the mouth. Cracked the limestone overhang along its natural fault lines, and let a few hundred tons of rock do what a 300-pound warhead can't. But the second boat was 90 seconds from the same entrance. If it reached the rock, one mouth sealed, one still functional boat sorted by morning, and the whole cycle starts over. He pushed the nose toward the coast and the throttle forward. At 12 miles, the ALR-69 screamed, phased array, bearing straight ahead the headland above the tunnel, the Tour M1. And here's why this is the one system A-10 pilots are specifically briefed to stay away from. The Tour M1 is a Russian-built short-range missile system, or SAM, that can go from detection to missile launch in 8 seconds. That's less time than it takes to read this sentence. Its missiles close at Mach 2.8, and at 5,000 feet and 220 knots, Pelican 31 was sitting inside the engagement envelope in an aircraft whose top speed is around 450 knots. You can't outrun a missile doing Mach 2.8 in an airplane that tops out at a speed more than 4 times as slow. The A-10 was built to take a punch, not dodge one. 3 options: brake hard and climb, lose the boats, lose the tunnel, and probably not outrun the Tour anyway because an A-10 doesn't have an afterburner. You push to the deck 200 feet over water, using the island's terrain to break the radar's line of sight. The way you duck behind a wall when someone points a flashlight at you. Or press the attack and accept that the next 60 seconds might include a missile. 3 options, and 2 of them end with going home empty-handed. Like your wife asking where you want to eat, there's really only one right answer. He pressed. Pelican 31 dropped to 200 feet and hugged the coastline. Limestone cliffs between him and the Tour's radar, breaking line of sight every time the terrain jutted seaward. If you look here at the engagement geometry, the Tour needs a continuous track to launch. Every time the A-10 ducked behind a cliff face, the track broke. Every time it broke, the 8-second launch clock reset to 0. The pilot was threading the coastline like a needle through fabric. Visible for 3 seconds, hidden for 5, visible for 2, hidden for 4. Never giving the Tour enough continuous track to fire. If you look here at the GA-8A Avenger, that's this cannon already spinning to speed. The pilot centered the pipper on the second pay cap, decelerating through 15 knots in the approach channel. 1 second burst. 65 rounds crossed the gap before the helmsman's brain could process the sound. Less machine gun, more like someone ripping the world's loudest zipper right next to your ear. 7 barrels, 3,900 rounds per minute. Each round a 30mm depleted uranium penetrator that shredded tank armor during the Cold War, and had been waiting for a reason to prove it wasn't retired yet. The rounds walked across the pay cap from stern to bow, and the hull erupted. Fiberglass, engine block, weapons rail shredded into a debris cloud that settled across the channel like gray ash. The manpad operator on the clifftop heard it fine, or he'd been tracking the A-10 for 12 seconds. Two bright exhaust streaks against cool ocean like neon signs, pointing straight at the engines. Solid tone. He squeezed the trigger, and the missile left the tube in a burst of white smoke. If you look here at the MISOG-2, Iran's copy of the Chinese QW-1, here's what makes it the one thing A-10 pilots lose sleep over. It doesn't emit anything. No radar, no signal, nothing on the warning receiver. It's a guy sitting in a dark room with a baseball bat. No alarm, no warning, just patience and a heat-seeking warhead. The ALR-69 didn't scream this time. Manpads don't emit radar. The first warning was the missile warning system catching the IR bloom. A smoke trail climbing from the cliff face at his 2 o'clock. He broke right hard, flares punching into the sky behind him. MJU-7s blooming at 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. The MISOG-2 seeker hesitated between the engine and the first flare, then snapped onto the second flare as it bloomed directly in the missile's flight path. The seeker followed the flare down and away. The missile detonated 400 meters behind and below the aircraft. Close enough to hear, not close enough to matter. The missile's infrared seeker locks onto the hottest thing it can see, the engine exhaust. When a flare ignites, it burns hotter than the engine. The seeker sees a new, brighter heat source and chases it instead. Think of it as throwing a steak to a guard dog so it chases dinner instead of you.